Hello everybody. Today's episode is going to be on why addiction is actually fake. Now, that's going to stir up some controversy, of course, because people say addiction is real all the time, and it seems like people are dying from their addictions and affecting others and destroying families, whatever it happens to be, whatever you're going to say. But I'm here to present you an alternate viewpoint on what addiction really is and how most people on this planet have addiction. So I really encourage you to keep an open mind and a real perspective of curiosity on this topic before you go and shut it down. So I'm going to reference my notes here. The first thing we have to do is explain how addiction is actually a very natural reaction for most people. Human beings have been doing this since the beginning of time. So in order to understand that, we first have to understand most people have addiction, including you, someone who you may say is never been addicted to anything in their life or is only addicted to coffee. So let's break down what's actually happening here so we can understand the statement that addiction is actually a natural reaction for most people. So first we have to look at what's going on. What's going on behind the scenes when someone is addicted to something? Well, let's start to become aware of that. Why don't you ask yourself, have you ever been standing in line where there's a bunch of people around you and you bring up your phone instead of talking to them? Or you need coffee every morning to function? Or you smoke cigarettes? Or you jerk off? Or you, again, I'm not saying any of these things are bad, actually. I'm simply helping you become aware of all of the different types of things people can be addicted to. Some people can actually be addicted to conversation because it's a way for them to escape the silence. And in that silence that they experience, they have a lot of emotional unrest that bubbles up to the surface. So people can actually use conversation as addiction. There are plenty of things. People use their job as addiction. People use so many things as addiction, it's unreal. And then on a few certain people that might have an addiction of drinking, smoking, or certain things, our society has decided to paint a certain picture essentially on that those specific addictions are worse than the others. Well, if we understand how addiction works here, that most people are running away from a feeling of unrest within themselves, and we'll get to why that happens. Everyone's addicted to something. So I want that to first get rid of some of the stigmatism and help you realize that you're probably addicted to things yourself. Say you have a partner who struggles with some sort of substance addiction and you may not. You have plenty of things in your life that you are addicted to escape the current reality of the situation. So I want to help take away some of the judgment and realize that we all have some of that inside us. And I think that's a really important first step to getting to the bottom of this thing. Now here's another big part. Why we shouldn't blame ourselves for addiction. And I'm going to touch on this again at the end of the video. Why we shouldn't blame ourselves for addiction. Every human is carrying out an auto-executed program that they've been programmed with through evolution, their family, their surrounding environment, and how they've taken things in due to their general perspective and how they've processed them. So that creates an auto-playing program inside each and every one of us that executes all the time when we are living. And knowing this information, if no one's presented us a better way of going about living and how to change that programming on the inside of our brain, then why can we blame ourselves? Well, it would suit to say that if someone's struggling with substance abuse and they have an experience of a very rough childhood or a certain life event that they're trying to escape some of the emotions of, and they start to drink and someone else is saying, or they start to smoke crack, like who knows what, insert addiction there, and the other person says, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and starts to blame, or the person themselves starts to blame themselves for it, that you need to stop doing immediately, because that person has been programmed to auto-execute that all the time. And unless they know exactly what's going on and exactly how to change that programming inside them, they shouldn't expect anything different from themselves. So what that does, it absolves personal doership of anything. Any person at any given time is carrying out their auto-executed program that they've been programmed with since birth. So when they're doing this thing, we can say, well, this person has had this, and this been going on in their life, and they've found this outlet to numb their pain. Well, I would expect them to do that because they've reinforced that current scenario a million times, and I can't expect them to change like that. And until you present counter evidence to yourself, or another person presents counter evidence to you, there's no reason why you should get mad at yourself, because that's what you are programmed to do at this given moment. That does not mean you should give into that and become a victim. That does not mean that whatsoever. What it means is that we can now go and change our original programming and then become a different person and not blame ourselves, because the second you blame yourself, it induces stress, it induces psychological unrest, shame, guilt, and a slew of other crazy, really, really tough, heavy emotions that isn't going to be beneficial for someone trying to do something positive and empowering for themselves. So if you're feeling all these crappy emotions on top of what you're already struggling with, why would you blame yourself? It's just going to add more fuel to that fire. So stop blaming yourself. Realize you're doing the best you can right now. You can't go back in time and change things. So what we can do is we can do the best we can right now and realize that and not blame ourselves. If we're truly doing the best we can right now, emotionally, because we act on emotions, not our intellect, because we are animals and we are emotional creatures by design. If we are doing that, then we are truly doing the best we can in any given situation. And I want to make a whole nother video on specifically that topic. Now that we've understood this, let's go into breaking down the entire cycle of addiction, how everybody's addicted and why everyone operates this way, and what we can do to change that. And I will be using specific examples on how to go about this and relate it to your own personal life or someone you know, so you can better help understand and influence someone's programming or your own. So, thanks for making it this long through the video. Now we're going to go into how this works, because all the verbiage in the world isn't good without a viable structure or diagram to operate within. So, we're going to go and we're going to show you this initial diagram here, but before we do that, I got to go over the categories here. So as you can see in the initial diagram, we have at the very bottom emotional belief or unmet need with emotional unrest. Now, let's go over to the different categories of that. The different categories are unresolved childhood stuff, which a lot of us have. Could be a traumatic event that we experienced at any point in our life. Could be a unmet expectation. Could be a insecurity. Could be a part of the self that we don't like to acknowledge and try to shove away. And that would also fall into the category of shadow stuff. So we have all these different categories, and the chart is going to actually look a little bit different depending on the category, but this is a very simple chart. So this is what we're going to stick with for now. So in this chart, you can see here, we're going to use John the alcoholic as our test subject here. And we have John the alcoholic, and he feels emotional unrest at the bottom here. Now, it starts to bubble up, and that's going to go into his addiction. That's his path. He's chosen alcoholism here. So basically, he has two paths he can go down here. He can go down the futile attempt to escape addiction, the dumb futile attempt to escape whatever emotional unrest he's having, which leads to suffering. Or we can take the path of bringing awareness to whatever thing that is and that is the path towards healing. Now we're going to get into our second chart, which is our emotional unrest chart and how to essentially identify that in some way. So you have to ask yourself these specific questions. So here's our example. You ask John, "Hey John, why do you drink?" Or John asks himself that question. And John says, "Because people are dicks." Well, really, is that the reason that you drink? On the surface it might be. So let's start the path of self-inquiry here. So the question we ask is, well, if that were true, if people were dicks, what would that mean about them or say about them as people? So really the core question is, if that were true, what would that mean or say about yourself? But in this case, he's talking about other people, but again, how we relate to ourselves is how we relate to other people, so it's the same thing basically here. So we ask him, what does that mean about them? He says, well, they're dicks. And so I say, well, if they're a dick, what does that mean or say about them? He says, they've got no friends. People probably don't like to be around them because they're assholes. And you ask him, well, what does that mean or say about you? And he says, that means that, they're probably losers and they don't have friends. And you ask him, okay, what does that mean or say about someone if they're a loser and they don't have any friends? Well, then no one likes them. And you say, well, what does it mean about someone if no one likes them? Or what does that say about them? It says that they're just a really terrible person. So we're starting to scratch the surface of the deep stuff here. And then we ask, well, if someone's a really terrible person, what does that mean or say about them? Well, like, what's that going to say about them? He says that they're just scum, like they don't deserve to be here. You say, well, if someone doesn't deserve to be here and they're scum, what does that mean or say about them? He says, well, that they're unlovable. Then you ask him, if someone's unlovable, what does that mean or say about them? He says, that they're scum. So now we've started to loop around the same two things. And we can see here that our core emotional unrest feeling is the feeling of being unworthy of love. So in John's case, he drinks because he feels unloved. Now that's such a big piece of emotional turmoil to be carrying around on your back everywhere. So no wonder he drinks. On the surface he says, because people are dicks. But when we trace that back and we go the path of self-inquiry, he doesn't feel loved. So as you can see in this chart, a simple thing at some point in his life where he didn't feel loved has turned into this huge problem because he has not brought awareness and chosen the path of emotional healing. But again, we as human beings, for thousands and thousands of years, pretty much since the beginning of time, have been trying to run away from our own shadows. We're just now starting to realize that it's healthy to bring these emotions up. Now I'm going to go into a little more depth on this topic, the different categories of emotions and how those show up, and some more specifics in another video. But I hope this really helped you get an idea of what addiction is, why we shouldn't judge it, why all of us pretty much have addiction here on planet Earth, and how it shows up in our lives and how we can start to become aware of that. So I hope this video helped you or helped someone that you know, and if you know someone who might benefit from this video, go ahead and feel free to share it. I appreciate you. Have a good rest of your day.